Medium endurance cutter with the hull designation 167.
Okay. And just for the record, Mr. I am aware of your identity, but at this moment you would like to stay anonymous. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And just for the people at home, so you know, I do know his full identity. He has fully disclosed who he is, and this is not, a random anonymous person telling us a story that we can't identify. Mr. Go ahead and just start from the beginning. I know there's some people that already know about this. It's kind of been around the net and on a few shows that have talked about it. But go ahead and start from the beginning from your experience, and then I may have some questions for you at the end.
Sure. I believe it was in 1976, and I was asleep below deck, and we got our general quarters alarm, which was pretty unusual for our ship because we didn't, unlike a naval vessel, we didn't tend to practice general quarters that often. We were more of a working vessel than military per se. As I came, I went rushing up the ladder, and I went through something that we called the doghouse, which was just an enclosure that led to the main deck. And as I got onto the main deck and came out into the real early morning light, I observed our corpsman on the back, on the fantail of the ship. And the first thing that struck me was there was this one cloud, and it was behind our vessel. And we were in the process of towing a huge observation / meteorological, supposedly at least, buoy. And this buoy was probably about 20 feet in diameter. But you couldn't see it because of this cloud. And the next thing that struck me was that it appeared that the tow cable was loose. So I thought, okay, we must have somehow lost the tow. Then there was always somebody on the fantail, watching it, and I saw the corpsman. We call him Doc. He's a first-class petty officer. But he wasn't looking at the cable. He was looking up in the air. And I looked up in the air, and I saw this classic UFO shape with lights that were undulating underneath from one direction and then would reverse and go back to the next direction. And I guess it might sound kind of surprising, but I didn't stop there to query him because we had general quarters going on, and just, I had to rush up to the bridge because my job, I was a quartermaster, third class, was to, during general quarters, my job was to maintain the ship's log. And I proceeded to do that, but as I got up to the bridge, there was some other chaos going on. Someone had just reported that they had lost steering, and the captain, or the XO, I don't recall, had ordered some people to go to the aft steering to try and get the vessel maneuvering controlled. Additionally, since I was up on the bridge, I saw that even though we weren't actually turning, at least not in any significant way, the compass on the ship was, and our electronics had either then gone out or had already gone out. So I was writing all of this down in the ship's log. You're supposed to record anything that's unusual or anything that you're ordered to. And then I went out onto one of the flying bridges to get a better look at this flying saucer anomaly. And at that time, I observed two F-4 Phantoms, Navy jets. We had actually been involved with the Navy the day before. They were using us essentially for target practice. There was an aircraft carrier, at least at that time, that had trained air crews, and I guess the rest of the guys on the carrier for duty, and it was stationed somewhere in Florida, I don't recall, but they essentially would, make passes by our vessel, and we tried to pick them up, but we didn't really have the equipment to pick them up before we were theoretically blown out of the water. So it was the day after that, but at that time, this flying saucer entity, if you will, made crazy maneuvers The F-4s did not actually come directly at the UFO. They were at an angle to it, but they flew past where it was located, essentially in the sky. That's the best way I can describe it. And this saucer initially headed in the general direction of the F-4s, but at a greater height, and then it completely reversed direction and disappeared in the blink of an eye. And immediately thereafter, what I noticed that our tow line was not towing this heavily electronic equipped buoy, if you will, and that cloud had dissipated. And so thereafter, they told us to, I forget what you call it, but leave general quarters. And so I was heading back down to, I guess, to my bunk or to talk to people about what had taken place. And I heard over the radio that they were calling the chiefs and the officers and I believe some others to the captain's stateroom. And I had gone down and talked to a few guys some guys that bunked near me were in the engine room and didn't really know anything about what had gone on. And I started saying to them, "You guys aren't going to believe this." And then I had gone back up, I guess, to chow or what have you, and I ran into the corpsman who had been on the fantail. Oh, by the way, the corpsman had also, on his walkie-talkie, said, "Get somebody back here because I'm not going to stand here alone," which is kind of disrespectful for a first class to talk to the bridge that way, but I can understand under these circumstances that he was scared, witless, and so I was really surprised at his response when, after this meeting that had taken place in the captain's cabin, that what he said to me, I had said to him, "Wow, Doc, that was crazy, huh?" And he said, "I don't know what you're talking about, and if you know what's good for you, you don't either." And then I had my watch had come up. It was time for me to stand watch. So I went to the plotting table where we also kept the ship's log, which was in the Coast Guard, and I'm sure in the Navy. Those things are sacrosanct. You're not supposed to mess around with them. You don't tear pages out. You don't make obliterations or anything. But lo and behold, there was a brand new logbook, and this book was definitely not full. So there was no reason except that they wanted to get rid of what was in that logbook. And a rumor just kind of went around the ship really fast, as I believe you mentioned to me briefly about someone else's experience. And it was surprising, but the word just got out that nobody was going to talk about this. And essentially, it just kind of went away, which was truly amazing to me. I have, however, on occasion spoken to a friend of mine who lives in Northern California, and over the phone, we've discussed it. And, it did happen, because otherwise I would think I must have had a psychotic break or something. But that's pretty much my whole story, sir.
Okay. And to reiterate, the year. Now, I've had a few reports of the different years that have been reported about this sighting. And there's been some of the, I think there was another witness that came forward from another program or interview where they weren't sure if it was 77 or 78. And it was kind
Mine was definitely 76 or 77.
Okay, so it was
because I was discharged in the latter part of 77. So.
Okay, and you think, do you remember the time of year? I mean, did it seem like, what was the weather like when, and what was the precise location where this happened, roughly?
Well, sir, we were between Miami and Cuba.
Okay.
Because that's where we dropped most of those buoys.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't honestly recall, latitude and longitude or what have you. Mm-hmm. My guess would be it was summer. I honestly cannot recall. I was having a hard time remembering the year, to be honest with you, whether it was 76 or 77. We dropped those buoys on a pretty regular basis along with people who were either from NOAA or I don't know who they were really with, because they had also told us not to talk to these people, but sometimes we'd have DEA people on board. Sometimes I don't even know what the true nature of these buoys was. All I knew is that we dropped them off around Cuba. So
yeah.
And they had a lot of electronic gear on them.
No, I'm sure. And so when so the year, you know, is roughly 76, 77.
Definitely one of those.
Yeah. And how long? What was the segment of time that you've served with the Coast Guard?
4 years, sir.
4 years. Okay. And do you remember the years between when you started, when you ended?
Yeah, I started the Presidential Honor Guard in 74, and I stayed there till 75. Then I went to QMSN school in Florida, and then I was assigned to the Acushnet.
Okay. During this event, and I want to go back to the object a little bit, can you describe in a little bit more detail, because I'm sure you got a pretty good look at it, what were the structural characteristics, and what was the overall shape, color, and distinctions that you can make out from your memory?
Okay. I would describe it as like a half circle, a semicircle, and grayish, and it had lights that I believe the lights would have been like red and green, perhaps another color, and they went go all the way in one direction, and then they came around in the other direction.
Was it like a circle, or was it two separate lights going the other direction, opposite, back and forth around the circle?
I believe that they were going in a circle, but I could only see one half of the cylinder, and then it would go in the opposite direction.
Okay. And so you said that it was a half circle, right? Can you describe the shape a little bit? Because I've gotten different descriptions from other reports, a little bit the same. They're all pretty much the same. But
I would say it was dome-shaped. Mm-hmm. Now, it might have had an extension on the bottom, but the best I can tell you is, unfortunately, it's been so long that I don't recall if it was, just a dome shape, or if it was a dome shape with an appendage on the bottom or not.
Okay. But pretty much overall shape, it was dome with a flat bottom. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And, I don't even know how long it had been there before I saw it. Mm-hmm. So perhaps somebody else got a better look at it than I did.
No, yeah, that's fine. What was the surface color of the object, since it was light out that day? Can you give a little bit of description?
The surface color?
Yeah.
It was grayish.
Grayish. Any reflection, sunlight, anything like that?
I don't believe so.
Okay. In your orientation, what direction were you facing when you were looking at the object when you came out of the hull of the ship?
Direction. Well, first I was facing aft towards the very back of the boat, and then when I turned to my right to start going up to another ladder, that's when I saw it. It was off the port bow, or the left rear part of our boat. Okay.
So you saw the object off the back, left, or port? Did you say port side?
Yes, sir. Left side towards the rear. It was like the left. It was pretty much just aft and to the left of our boat.
Okay, and roughly how? Yeah, I mean, you guys are usually at a standard coast, so I mean, how fast? How many knots were you guys moving?
We were pretty slow, probably maybe 10 knots.
Okay. And did the object seem like it was fairly close, or was it at a pretty good distance?
I'd say it was perhaps, let's say, 400 or 500 yards. Okay.
And at arm's length, if you were to hold up any kind of common object, how big would the object be at arm's length?
I'd say about the size of my hand.
Okay. And a fist or an open hand?
An open hand, sir.
Okay. Now, you described that it made some strange maneuvers when you went up to the observation deck, correct?
Yeah.
Can you describe that in detail, roughly, if you can remember, how many turns and what kind of turns or maneuvers did it make?
Yeah, I do recall it. It seemed to be stationary at the time that I initially observed it. And when I was on the flying bridge and looking at it as the F4 started to come towards it, it left that initial position and started heading in the general direction of those F4s, and then it banked in the completely opposite direction and elevated further its altitude and just took off at an incredible speed. I mean, literally, I'd say in like a blink of an eye, it then disappeared.
When you mentioned that it banked or turned and went a different direction, usually I ask the question, did the object stay in a perfect plane, or did it actually bank like an airplane would on a turn?
I'd say it stayed, I'd say it stayed, that's a good point. Its appearance to me didn't seem to change, just altitude.
Okay. And absolutely no noise or anything like that. Is that correct?
No noise. One thing that I don't know if this is an accurate.
Any detail is fine.
I seem to feel like, I want to say almost like there were not vapors coming out of it, but it looked like there was something just kind of weird about the atmosphere around it.
Were there any colors associated with the atmosphere, and can you describe it a little bit?
No, it's almost just like it's almost like the atmosphere was vibrating around it, I guess would be the way I could describe it.
Mm-hmm.
It just seemed like the atmosphere was a little out of place around it.
Is there anything that you can compare it to, something that you've seen before?
I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank.
No, it's okay. Did it look like? Have you ever seen a mirage on a road before?
Oh, thank you. That's actually perfect. Yeah, yeah. I used to live in Arizona. Yeah, that's exactly what it looked like. Okay. Yeah, or at least that's my recollection.
No,
yeah.
That's fine. I just wanted to see if there was an example that you could compare it to.
Yeah. That was perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's a characteristic we've heard quite often. Now. When it moved, I mean, I guess when it disappeared, it happened after the F4s came through and strafed the area or kind of orbited your boat, correct?
Right. It disappeared after they came. Yeah.
Okay. And when it disappeared, how did it leave? Did it leave at a 45-degree angle? Did it go up?
Yeah.
Did it go...
Actually, I would say that it went up about maybe 45 degrees from. It had already changed its position. Let's say,
okay.
Let's just say it's
its first position
500 feet above the ocean. Okay. And then it changed its position. It moved to where it would be like even with our flying bridge, but higher up.
Mm-hmm.
F4s come flying by. Then they were flying by pretty much at the bow of the ship, let's say, and then that thing. Then at another 45 degrees, but at a higher altitude, just disappeared in the opposite direction.
Okay. All right. Now, you spoke about there being...
Now, there was a cloud layer higher up, I guess.
Yeah.
My recollection is that it seemed to disappear into the clouds.
Okay, so there was a little bit of... Was it partly cloudy, overcast, or was it...
It would be partly.
Okay.
I remember that it was a clear day.
Okay.
I'm sure that I even put that into the log.
Yeah.
I recall.
Okay. Now, you spoke about there being somewhat of a malfunction in the ship. Can you describe in details what was malfunctioning and what was occurring at that time?
Well, one thing that I know is that I had spoken to some of the engine room guys who said the engine had gone out, steering went out, our electronics went out, so that we weren't even able to talk, for example, to the engine room without using walkie-talkies. The magnetic compass was acting weird. It wasn't spinning around fast, but it was just moving completely, 360 degrees, even though the ship wasn't. I know that what they call the battle lanterns came on, which is like, separate from the regular electronics. So I think we had and in fact, I can almost remember the captain saying that we had a complete electronic failure. But then as soon as that UFO took off,
Okay, and you said you guys were communicating with walkie-talkies. Were those handheld, battery-deviced, or were they plugged into a system?
I don't remember how they work, whether they're the kind that you charge up with an AC or if you use batteries, but I kind of think they're battery-operated.
Okay. And they seem to be working fine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't remember any problems with them.
Alrighty.
I certainly could hear the scared corpsman talking to the...
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And so so the malfunctions were occurring and they only came back on when the craft had left. And you said that the battle lantern was on. Can you describe what that means and what a battle lantern is? And
Oh, they're just lights that come on automatically if you lose power.
Okay.
It's just like you have, in your home.
Right. And did the ship that you're operating in, did it depend on the engines for power, or did they have battery backups? Okay, so once the engines go out, you lose power, correct?
Right. We had a couple of Cummins diesel engines on board.
Okay.
It's like a 213-foot, I think, vessel.
So, are there any other details? As far as what was, the water cooler talk that you talked about, people kind of talking about it. Are there any specific details, officers, different people that were making comments that said certain things? Can you recall any of those different instances?
It's kind of hard to explain it to people that don't have that experience, but it sounds like you do. Yeah. It's almost like being brainwashed. It's you do what you're told, period, and If somebody higher up told you at some point, don't talk about it, you just don't. I mean, honestly, we didn't. There was the initial scuttlebutt, like I shared with you when it first happened, but as soon as the word got out from chief to first class to second class that you don't talk about it, and for years we didn't talk about it. And it's amazing to me when I think about it, but I guess it speaks to dynamics of psychology or whatever. But no, we just didn't talk about it. Not even on the flying bridge late at night. We just stopped talking about it.
And was anything said, though, between that time and when people just started to say, we shouldn't talk about it? I guess was it the silence and the people aware of the situation and they just said, well, let's just not talk about it, and they just didn't? Or were there things said and then things started quieting down?
Certainly within the first day, people stopped talking about it.
Okay, and then within that time right after, what was being said? Were there any details that you remember?
Well, you know what? First of all, there was a limited number of us that were actually above deck. Mm-hmm. And of those of us that were above deck, there was, a limited number of people that were the same rank or lower than me. So I would just talk, for example, the ship's cook, for whatever reason. His name was Trujillo, by the way. He, for some reason, he had observed it, and he was the one that I talked to about it, and just about that, some crazy this, that, and the other thing. And then she would talk about, they just covered this stuff up. But this guy had been around for longer than me, and he had just said, I've heard about this stuff before, and they just tell you to shut the you-know-what up, and people shut up, and it's almost like, if you and your buddies went out drinking and you hit somebody and you ran them over and you decided you were not gonna talk to it. It was fear, I think it was partially fear of this is so crazy, it's beyond,
right,
understanding. And also, I don't want to wind up on an icebreaker in the North Atlantic,
Yeah, career threatening.
If you don't talk about it, you're thoroughly scared enough to not.
Right. Now, were you spoken to directly, like as a debrief or anything like that? Nothing?
Honestly, no, except for that first class petty officer telling me that if you know what's good for you, you won't say anything either, essentially.
So there was
he wasn't my direct line, because I was a quartermaster, I know that you would expect that we would have heard. Oh, well, I will say, I now that we're talking, I do remember that the guy who was the first class, who was my direct boss, I started the conversation about it with him, and he just said, I don't know what you're talking about. And, gave me that look like, shut your mouth. So So that was pretty much the end of that conversation with him.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, people did talk, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But there was never anything like, general muster with the captain coming down and chewing us out and saying, you're sworn to secrecy. We were told, it didn't happen. Don't talk about it.
Okay. And since then, have you reconnected with any friends or people that knew about this incident? And have you guys...
I've actually, I've had limited discussions with people that I was in the service with that were on that ship, actually. Like I told you, there was one guy who I was on that ship who lives in Northern California. I spoke to him, and we discussed that and some other stuff a number of years ago, a few times, but I kind of lost track of him. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing I'm hoping to do is, see if I can get some other people to, come forward as it were.
So if you were to sum up your experience and your overall thought about what happened, can you kind of give us a sense of how the experience has changed your view on?
For many years I kind of wondered, hey, could this be like some secret government project and that's why the F-4s were there? But honestly, in my heart of hearts, I know that there's no way that we have that kind of technology and haven't utilized it, or it hasn't come out. So I think that they are from another planet. I think that they might even have bases underwater. I think they were curious about what that weird thing full of electronics was that we were telling. And I think perhaps the fact that the day before we had been involved with the Navy made them even think, hey, maybe it's some kind of military weapon or something. So I think they're real. I mean, I haven't had any other experiences about it or anything with that, but I think it must be real. So I didn't take